We ended this year on some very somber information that we had broken all records for homicides, which is something that you never want to break. I want to welcome my guest, Christopher 2X, who works so hard in this city for us to have understanding, for people to reach the goals that they want. We had a report from you, from Game Changers, Christopher 2X, about the homicides. Talk about the homicides and where we stand now. What in the world are we doing?
Well, Dawne, you and I talked about this over the summer of 2020, and unfortunately, when we ended up at the end of December with 173 fatal homicides, of course, that broke the all-time record in 2016 of 117. That would have been the Louisville all-time record. And unfortunately, 586 individuals were wounded in Jefferson County, also in 2020. And what's really disturbing and really kind of even more breaks your heart is 97 out of 173 fatal homicides were individuals 30 years and younger. And at the end of the day, it's issues that have kind of just chugged along from the last 6 years, in my opinion, where these uptickings of shootings have just happened. But equally at the same time, the shooters are getting younger, and unfortunately, the victims are getting younger.
Okay, so you just gave that information, 97 victims under the age of 30, but this is what's heartbreaking for me. 16 of those were under the age of 18.
Yes.
And then you have 3 children under the age of 5. Gun shootings or gun woundings or harm of any kind shouldn't, even a 3-year-old or younger shouldn't even have to be thinking about that. But that's what our community looked at. What are we doing? What is wrong with us?
Well, Dawne, and we've talked about this again over the summer of 2020, you and I, several times. You know, I talked to elementary school principals, and they were very point of fact about how we're starting to lose kids as far as behavioral issues before they even start K through 12, coming out of preschool. Now, that's hard to grasp, but unfortunately, it's strong evidence now that there's not early intervention in elementary school and middle school. By the time these kids get to high school, it's a hard turnaround. So some parents, you know, they think, Dawne, oh, I see these behavioral issues. They'll grow out of that. They're still young.
No.
Early intervention is really essential, and we've got a lot of mental health issues that need to be addressed, to be quite frank with you.
Well, and that is something that we talk about continuously, you and I. But, you know, I did a report, and this was a couple of years ago when WAVE decided to have these community meetings because we had to talk about what happens when you're in the midst of violence and danger. For children, and this is a known medical fact now, I can't think of the young man that came on the show, but I think it was Peter Fonda's son, who is now doing reports. And you may wonder why when you go to an emergency room or your doctor's office, they say, is anyone harming you? You know, are you in harm in any way? Does anybody mistreat you? Because they used to not do that. But what they have found is that when you are even around danger or gunshots or anything like that, for children, it physically changes your brain.
It does, Dawne.
Yep, and I came from an abusive marriage, so my 2 kids were there, and they told me, because your 2 kids were in the midst of that, you know, it changed them.
It does.
But see, I never thought that when I was a young mother married in that abusive situation. So we have to think a lot more than just don't pick up a gun. If you're around it, it can change you. It
can change you, Dawne, and kids just hearing gunshots in the neighborhoods changes kids. We did a report, Game Changers did, that we released in November of 2019, titled Violence, the Impact on Children Learning. And we got testimonies from families who had kids, again, in elementary school, middle school, and you heard kind of the same redundant line about how they're impacted in many ways by this kind of trauma, and it affects their learning focus when they try to go back into school.
I just feel like I don't want to be all about bad news.
No.
I want to know what do? We have so many issues. Even amongst those homicides, you had for the first time so many women. I think there were more women killed ever in history.
34 in 2020, and Dawne, that's a sad note in itself. It breaks your heart. And to be quite frank with you, that's something for a lot of individuals to ponder on. Why is the sanctity of life, especially with children and women, not seen as a valuable situation anymore when you see that uptick in women getting hit by gunfire, and especially the young, and the way they're getting hit?
So I know this is what you do for your life. This is what you have done for over 20 years now, is trying to understand this and be a buffer between what happens. Do we have answers? Like, I don't know what's, and this may sound crazy to you, 2X, but I see people run through lights now, and I'm like, do they know that that's a law? You don't just drive through a red light. Violence is happening, people buying guns on the street, the way we talk to each other on social media and in person now. You don't disrespect or talk to people, and you don't disregard someone just because of how much money they make or what color they are. I feel like I just want to shake the world and say, what is wrong with you?
And
what do we do?
Well, I think sometimes the ugly needs to manifest to its maximum height.
God, have we not reached that yet?
For us, hopefully, for us to feel the impact of how that's not attractive anymore. And so as it relates to the shootings, on hopefully a hopeful note, more people becoming aware like never before. And I think that the more we talk about mental health services, mental health connections and trauma services connected to these families, and especially how the kids are being subjected to this kind of impact at very young ages, people will start to feel that heartstring of, hey, guess what? This is just like COVID-19. It's got my attention like never before, and now we're going to start to work on the solutions even in a more vigorous way. So that's the hope sign for me. I think more people have become aware out of 2020 and beyond, and even when we look back. And I think at the end of the day, by so many people understanding that it's a serious issue, hopefully good solutions will come. And I'll wrap up on this. Hopefully the non-attractive attitude will start to take place, where those who look at shooting as an attractive deal won't see it so much the same anymore.
I've got to say, I don't see how it could even be looked at as attractive, but I know that in videos and movies and things like that, they do their best.
Unfortunately.
Yes, they do. So let me talk about what you do, your game changers. Is it you all who talk about your superhero powers?
Well, Christopher 2X Game Changers, we talk about a lot of things to kids.
Right. I have,
that's
my
not
nephew is always
us.
okay, but
Now,
I've heard about that, and he always says my superhero power is that I'm kind, and I always tell him, yes, you are. So talk about
that's the global game changers.
That's the global game changers. Okay, it's so funny. He always talks about. He comes and says, "Auntie, what's your superhero power?" And I'm like, I don't know. He said, "You help people," and I'm like, okay.
By the way, that advocacy group is just great. I applaud them for their work. But Christopher 2X Game Changers, specifically, if there's a conversation line, it's about how do we target education to try to at least deal with the violence. Simple as that.
But when you say the game changers, you're in the community. You're talking to the kids. You're showing them this is what looks right and good, and this is how you can be successful. But how do we help you with that here with your game changers?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people want to learn more about us, they can go to 2xgamechangers.org and read a lot of things. I would specifically ask them to read the section on educate and hear some of the testimonies from the young, and you all can see how you can help us, and I'll be willing to talk to anybody about how you can help us once you look at that website and the information.
But, you know, when you talk about education even, we've got to make sure that old children have what they need to learn. I know that a higher education is expensive and everybody can't reach that goal. So I wonder how we level the playing field some.
Well, our job is to be a good link and connector to those who have the resources and the knowledge to try to help them get to that next, plight that they need to get to. So again, our organization is about being a good link and connector with community partners. And so I would ask again, for anybody who wants to learn more about us, go to 2xgamechangers.org. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very accessible. And if I can't help with the problem, I'm always willing to be the link and connector to somebody else that can.
Well, you know what? You are always helping, and we appreciate that. I do wish people, though, would stand and not be so ashamed if they're in need of any kind of help, whether that is not having enough food, not having enough money, having a mental issue that needs some help. Shame sometimes that we give to each other really keeps us from reaching out, becoming the people we can be.
It does. And, Dawne, I'd like to just say this real quick. When I talk to parents and others, I tell them all the time, some things we might not see as urgent, but they could be urgent. So it's just like if you get the news from a primary care physician that there's a problem with your child as far as a health issue, or there's an emergency comes up, you have a no-nonsense attitude on rushing that kid to Norton Children's Hospital. Feel the same about other issues that
Yes.
you feel ashamed about. And let an alarm bell go off in your head or mind and say, you know what, this is urgent, let me seek help, and I shouldn't feel ashamed to do so.
All right, that's one thing we got to get rid of that. Christopher 2X's Game Changers. We're grateful to have him here in our community. 2xgamechangers.org is the site. See how you can get involved. But when we come back, Christopher 2X will be very honest and open about things that he did. But you look at him now, and some people say, no, he didn't. Yeah, but look at him now. We all can do and be what we need to be. And also Rob Givens, State Director of the Office of U.S. Senator Rand Paul, will join us. Stay with us as we continue this conversation.